Good morning, all, and welcome to this Watershed Festival panel conversation on decolonizing music theater. My name is Colleen Renihan. I am a musicologist and an assistant professor at the Dan School of Drama and Music at Queen's University. And I'm coming to you today from my home in Kingston, Ontario, where I am a settler scholar on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. And I am beyond grateful to the artists who are joining me today on this panel to discuss what it means to decolonize music theater. As I prepared for this discussion today, I want to just give a huge thank you to my Indigenous colleagues and to the writers and scholars whose work inspires me to listen, create, teach, and prioritize differently. So for this conversation, I'm delighted to be sharing this space and time with a group of truly inspiring Indigenous artists from the worlds of opera, theater, dance, and musical theater, all of whom I have heard speak and perform in various contexts, and who I approach to come together and help us consider this crucial question of what decolonization means and why it means, how it means in the context of music theater. So if you've been with us in the previous panels and conversations, even this morning with Rena Roussin's presentation and Nina Penner's presentation, these questions arose. And we extend them here today in our panel conversation. And so we're hoping for a conversation that engages all of you here in the way that you would like to be involved. And so we will have a discussion that's about an hour long. And I would invite you just to put questions or comments in the chat, and we will hope to pick those up as we move through our conversation. And I will try and keep an eye on that so that I can help your questions be heard. So as we begin, let me just present our esteemed panelists to you. And then I will stop speaking and invite them all to speak. So I'll begin with Julie Lumsden. Julie is a proud member of the Manitoba Métis Federation with Scottish and German settler ancestry. She holds a Bachelor of Music in Classical Voice Performance from the University of Manitoba. She is currently in her third season at the Shaw Festival and has performed on such stages as RMTC, PTE, MTYP, Rainbow Stage, Theatre Cercle Molière, Magnus Theatre, Neptune Theatre, and more. Her work is a reflection and a mimic of the astounding artists she's been around thus far in her career, specifically the resilient, strong, gracious, and trailblazing women she's had the distinct privilege of learning from. Welcome, Julie. Cuaigioth, Stolo, English, Irish, Scottish mezzo-soprano Marion Newman has been acclaimed for her roles in Barber, Carmen, and Missing, among many others I know, and she was nominated for a Dora Award in Shauna Did It, which is an opera by our very own Dean Bury, and Yvette Nolan, who's joining us here on this panel as well. Recently, Marion has been working on rising to the expectations of her talented and respected colleagues who continue to give her opportunities to share her voice as a speaker, teacher, facilitator, advisor, and dramaturge for various institutions and arts organizations across Canada. The Seeds of Namwayat, We Are All One, is a recent documentary witnessing of the work of how to create an opera in a collaborative manner, commissioned by Calgary Opera. And we will see some of this, by the way, tonight in our New Works showcase. So thank you to all of the creators for sharing that work with us. Marion is a proud co-founder of Amplified Opera, and upcoming appearances include Migrations in her debut with the Welsh National Opera. Warm welcome to Marion. Yvette Nolan is an Algonquin playwright, director, and dramaturg. Her works include the play The Unplugging, the dance opera Bearing, the libretto Shauna Did It, the short play for film Catharsis, and the audio plays Lashpa La Patate and You Can't Get There From Here. She was one of the 10 writers on Gabrielle Dumont's Wild West show. She co-created with Joel Birnbaum and Lancelot Knight the verbatim play Reasonable Doubt about relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan. She's currently working on Tapwewin with Maria Campbell, on Namwayat with Marion Newman, on Sophia with Tim Brady. From 2003 to 2011, she served as artistic director of Native Earth Performing Arts. Her book, Medicine Shows About Indigenous Performance in Canada, was published by Playwrights Canada Press in 2015. She is Artistic Associate with Signal Theatre and the Company Dramaturg for Some Theatre. She is currently pursuing her Master's in Public Policy at Johnson Graduate School of Public Policy. Welcome, Yvette. And finally, Emily Johnson is an artist who makes body-based work. She is a land and water protector and an activist for justice, sovereignty, and well-being. A Bessie Award-winning choreographer, Guggenheim Fellow, and recipient of the Doris Duke Artist Award. She is based in Lenapehoking, New York City. Emily is of the Yupik Nation, and since 1998 has created work that considers the experience of sensing and seeing performance. Her dances function as portals and care processions. They engage audienceship within and through space, time, and environment, interacting with a place's architecture, peoples, history, and role in building futures. Emily is trying to make a world where performance is part of life, where performance is an integral connection to each other, our environment, our stories, our past, present, and future. A warm welcome to Emily. So, welcome all of you. I am delighted to have all of you in the same place, if not in the same space, shall we say, if not in the same place. And I wondered if we could begin maybe with each of you telling us a little bit about a project that you are involved with or have been involved with, perhaps, that most effectively embraces the ideals of decolonization, whatever that might be. I realize that's a lofty question. And I'm not sure who would like to start.
Okay, I'll start. That means I get to plant the flag. Yvette Nolan. My name is Yvette. My people are from Kitaganzi Algonquin First Nation, but I'm beaming in from Treaty 6 territory. I'm in Saskatoon, which is Cree territory. So I am a guest here, but also in the internet, where we are all just sort of, where are we? I guess I will talk about Shaunadithit, which was the project that Marion and I did that sort of launched us on another journey of a whole bunch of other things. Tapestry Opera produced this. Dean Bury, who is, I know he's there because he said hi. I'm like, hi, Dean. Was fascinated with the story of Shaunadithit, who was the last of the Beothics. She makes air quotes. The Beothic people who were the indigenous folk in Newfoundland before contact, who were extirpated, disappeared by contact. And then there's more to be discussed about that. But Shaunadithit was the last of the Beothic people, and she died at the end of the 19th century. Yes, and left no words, but she left some sketches. So Dean, who has been fascinated as a Newfoundlander, born and bred with that story all of his life, and as long as I've known him, which is 20 odd years, I think, hey, Dean, asked me if I wanted to work on this project with him as the librettist. And Tapestry Opera took up the challenge of producing it. And that was the beginning of, Tapestry had been undergoing its own sort of process of self-examination and decolonization and indigenization, I think. And when we entered into this process with them, we needed, and it's not just me, we and Dean, it's like Marion was in the project from the very beginning. And we knew that because we were speaking for a woman and a nation who were no longer here, that there were going to be protocols that we had to follow. And Tapestry stepped up. They agreed to make the space the way we as Indigenous artists needed to make the space. They undertook self-examination aside from the room. They did not expect us as the Indigenous folks to do to teach everything. They got their own elder and their own knowledge keeper, and they did that work outside of the room with their board, with their staff, so that the space in the room was safe. It doesn't mean it was it doesn't mean it was without challenges. We still ran into challenges every step of the way, but because we had set up a process that was Indigenous practice, we had the means to have those discussions. We started every day with circle. We started every day with check-in. So we knew where people were at. We had a means to resolve issues. There was way more conversation than in any room I've ever been in. And I've been in a lot of Indigenous run rooms over my career. But because this was an 8 Fire project, like a non-native and a non-native organization and a native story and creation, we had to negotiate all of those practices, which we did. And to Tapestry's credit, Michael Morey and Jamie Martino and everyone else there, they did the work. They did their own work as well as the work that we asked them to do in the room. I think that's what I'll sort of set up to launch with, because I've probably used up all my time.
These questions could go on, and I know that there are probably many examples that you could all draw from. Emily, I wonder if there's something that you'd like to share about something you've been working on or have worked on.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Chmai, I'm Emily Johnson. As Colleen said, I am of the Yupik Nation. I am currently on Agawamnik Muk and Pocumtuck lands, but usually live on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in Lenape Hill King, and very happy to be here with all of you amazing folks. I'm in a big dance studio with lots of light and kind of wood beams behind me, a lot of open space, which is nice. I'm wearing a black shirt that says "No Colonizers" and like a really cool font. I have dark hair and it's down. And my voice tends to get a little shaky when I talk, but it's just because something's often emotional is kind of moving through. So I'm happy to share that with you, because that's my reality, is that I find emotion in these discussions, or it finds me, I guess I would say. And Yvette, it was so awesome to hear you talk about this process, and specifically that the institution, had its own process in that other space, because that is what is so often missing, actually, and is so essential. So I'm going to share that. So I worked with Santa Fe Opera a few years ago. In 2018, we were working on the production Dr. Atomic. And through that process, and this has 2 parts of the story, but I'll try to be quick. So coming in as a choreographer, a guest on Tewa Lands, I met with the governor of Tesuque Pueblo, which is the land upon which Santa Fe Opera occupies, because we knew that Dr. Atomic, as Dr. Atomic is written, it involves a dance from Pueblos that has always been written in, though that was never a part of communication or collaboration with Pueblo people. And so obviously that needed to shift and change. And obviously that was part of bringing me in as the choreographer, and in collaboration with the director, Peter Sellers. I mean, we knew that this was going to be a big shift in this version of Dr. Atomic. And we had the support to rethink this process. And of course, also the content of Dr. Atomic is really about the creation of the atomic bomb on Tewa lands, on Indigenous lands. And so here we are going into a rehearsal process and performing this piece on Tewa lands. And so we were really quite met with the reality of that continuing atrocity. And so that was also brought in via the many different kind of the many different communities that we partnered with, folks who have continuing health effects due to the nuclear industry that still wreaks havoc on Indigenous lands and on communities. And so we were in no way shying away from the many issues that had maybe not been, which are talked about in Dr. Atomic, but weren't like met with land and people and culture and experience. And so this brought about really rich, like talking circles, healing circles, communities coming together with conversation with the governor of Tasuki. As I mentioned, I had started a process of land acknowledgement and recognition with Santa Fe Opera. They had not ever had that process in place before. Down here in what is called the United States, many institutions aren't engaged even in that process. And I know we could have a whole other panel on what that means. But it was really important, you know, that this season, Santa Fe Opera had to really move forward into a deeper relationship with the communities upon whose lands they are. So the leadership of Santa Fe Opera was very much down for this work then, and we had a long process of what land acknowledgement means, how it needs to be actionable, how it needs to be in relationship with communities, how it's actually a process toward land back, and it must be in that ongoing living conversation. And then we developed a collaboration with Santa Clara Pueblo, San Ildefonso, and Tasuke Pueblo, and dance leaders and drummers were part of the production. We created a new dance that was gifted to the production, kind of extending the opera with a start that began with the dancers from the Pueblos, and then within the production, the different dance happened. So this was like this was like a monumentally historic, like the dancers from the Pueblos were like, damn, we're here on this stage, like, yes, and let's keep this going. How do we keep this going? And yes, it was like I beam when I think about it, because it was like a really wonderful process. And yes, there were also challenges along the way, and we also had to like be confronted with the fact that the audience on that first night didn't know what the hell was going on. They didn't know how to take in a dancers from the Pueblo on the stage, you know. So we had to meet and kind of teach the audience through the summer how to meet this gift, you know. And all of this led actually to the development of the Pueblo Opera Cultural Council, to like an ongoing process of Pueblo-led directives centered on healing, centered on change, with, again, representatives from those three Pueblos that I mentioned. So I've been working with the Pueblo Opera Cultural Council now on like a separate contract to kind of to kind of hone our visioning, to organize the thoughts and the processes that we want to bring forward and with Santa Fe Opera, and it's been really amazing. But now the second part of the story, which I promise will be 2 seconds, is that unfortunately, like, while we have this amazing group of Indigenous thinkers, cultural knowledge keepers, community members, mothers, aunties, grandmas, together to do this thinking together, to do this visioning together, to really lay out for the opera, here's a way toward a deeper relationship. Here's a path toward really creating consistent programming, consistent relationship building with the audience, like a real shift for this audience to understand where they are in the context of any opera that they come to witness, right? A really generous undertaking, but I think that this crucial part that we missed is something that you described, Yvette, which is that the opera itself, under different leadership and changes, COVID, everything that has been going on, there's like a little bit of a step back from the institution, because I don't think that there's been that real, as you described it, what was it, that like internal scan, that internal work that needed to, that's a little bit missing. So while we have all this great work happening here, it can't meet the institution right now, and so we're trying to sort that out right now. So I'll offer that and pause now.
Thank you so much for that, Emily. So many things to ponder in there. And hopefully we can take up that bit that you were speaking about at the end, you know, in our subsequent conversation, but I want to give a chance to Julie and Marion to speak about a project that has been meaningful to you in this way.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, I'm so humbled and I feel very grounded to be able to be in conversation with these three women. So pardon me if I'm a little nervy today, but I just want to say that I am zooming in from the lands of the neutral nation, the Mississauga, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. I'm a proud Métis woman with Scottish and German settler ancestry from Treaty 1 Winnipeg. I have long dark hair, wearing a black shirt, and I have a white background. I'm an emerging artist. I've had the great fortune to be able to work so far in my career, and I haven't been in a lot of rooms that have been centered around decolonizing processes. I've been part of many Indigenous stories, played Indigenous characters, but never been led by an Indigenous leader within the room, which is something that I hope will change very soon. In terms of the process that I think embrace that idea the most is something that I know that we've talked about in this week so far, and that's the Messiah Complex project with Against the Grain Theatre. And this was directed by Joel Ivany and Renelta Arluck. And Renelta took hold of the Indigenous pieces. And for someone who mostly works in musical theater, I have a degree in classical voice, but that's not where my pull was professionally. That's not the vehicle in which I choose to tell my stories most often in my career. And so getting this email from Joel and Renelta in the fall, and this project that I could not have foreseen for myself in my career, was a real moment of reckoning in terms of what my relationship to classical music was, what my relationship to theater was, what my relationship to musical theater was, and and what kind of artist and what kind of package I bring to that. And it was so clear to me that I'd never brought my full humanity, my full self, my full ancestry, everything to classical music. And for me, I think that came from the fact that it was because it was tied to academia, the long history of Eurocentric values within classical music, kind of what I had been taught in my degree. And I think that was part of the reason why, as soon as I graduated, I kind of put that on the shelf and said, that's not where I want to spend my time. So for this offering from Joel and Renelta to say, we're looking into doing this historically Eurocentric Christian-based piece, and from the onset, the care that they had taken in even approaching even the first pitch email was kind of put me on my toes a little bit, because I hadn't been approached in that way yet to do these Eurocentric pieces. And the expectation of what the artist was in control of in that piece was something that felt the most kind of decolonizing. It really felt like it was a collaboration in all the best senses of the word, that it wasn't working within this hierarchy or this kind of top-down waterfall of power. I really felt invigorated to bring my whole self, to bring everything that I wanted to, and that there was no expectations of saying, you know, we need you to do it in your language, or we need you to do this. That it really felt like I could come where I'm at in my culture, where I'm at with my reconnection, with where I'm at with who I am as an artist. And to me, that was something that was so powerful. I didn't feel like there was a certain amount of fill in the blank that was expected as an Indigenous artist within this project. So that for me was probably the most decolonizing process yet. I really hope that I get a bajillion more.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. And Marion.
Yeah, I actually have 4, and Yvette talked about Shauna Divot already, so I don't need to go into that further. But the Regina Symphony has an Indigenous Advisory Council, which I've been a part of from the beginning. Gordon Gerard is a very good friend of mine and has been for a long time, and is the artistic director, the music director of the Regina Symphony. And understanding that he lives in Regina and that those lands are not his, he immediately realized that in order to further reconciliation, he needed to gather around him community, Indigenous community from the area, which includes First Nations and Métis people from there. And I'm invited as an artist. I'm actually Kwagyulth and Stalo from the West Coast, as well as half settler from Saskatchewan, actually. So it is an honor for me to be working in concert with this community of mostly non-musicians who share what it is to be living the Indigenous experience. And we meet whenever we need to discuss something. And that is just about everything that the Regina Symphony is doing. It's a very decolonized process to be able to have a say in programming, in what artists are brought in how we are represented, in how we welcome them, and then how we well, just to have a voice, to actually be heard and to watch that turn into action. So I really wanted to mention that. Another one has been I Call Myself Princess. It's a play with opera about an opera singer who actually existed. And I played her, Chanina Redfeather. And that is there. The second time we performed it was at the Globe Theatre in Regina. And Janny Lauzon, the playwright, actually directed as well. And so starting each day with a smudge and creating a space in which ceremony and work coexist. And that it was in the round. It was my first time. I know that's like a thing for theater people, but it was my first time performing in that setting, not at a potlatch where we're dancing around a fire. And so constantly shifting where we were sharing our focus so that the whole audience in that round could be part of it, to me really felt very decolonized and to really just sort of turned what I know of theater on its head a little bit. And to have had that whole stage painted with an underlay of design that would give us power and connect us to the ancestors that the audience was actually never even aware of, was all of these layers that were for the players, for the story, for Chanina and all of her ancestors who came before and who still exist now. And I said I had 4. I'm forgetting right now. Oh no, Bearing, which Yvette was part of in creating and in directing alongside Michael Grey Eyes. It involved dance and again, a theater that was almost all the way around, but it happened to be a square, was the way it used dance and vocal music and movement and storytelling was the first time I got to witness what it is for Indigenous people to create something that mashes up existing music, and as well as a new piece that was brought on for that work. And yes, I see Taya has mentioned Namayut, of course, and I think we'll probably talk about that more later, and that was this year, and it's a project that is ongoing, so I'll just put that one out there as something we can probably discuss as we go on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all so much for this, for sharing, these examples of projects that you've been a part of. The next question I have is about, it's acknowledging what it was that, Yvette was saying about, Tapestry and the team really taking on this responsibility to do their own consulting and their own work before the group entered the rehearsal room and thinking about that responsibility. So I'm conscious of that as I ask this question. But I am wondering about, we're all, in this room, I'm thinking about all of the people here as well listening to this panel, thinking about how to move this forward, like how to be an ally, how to be a supporter of this work and a champion of this kind of work. And so I would wonder, what is one thing that you would suggest that companies, artists could do as a next step or as a crucial first step in moving this kind of important work forward?
I will go again first. Sorry, women. I think there's two things that are interconnected, and one is first of all to start and have a discussion in your organization about what decolonization means to you, because we all think we are talking about the same thing, but everybody, once you start speaking it into the air, you get an idea of what everybody's perception of a word is, any word. But in this case, in such an important case, decolonization, what are we talking about? What does that mean practically? That's thing one. And the other thing, which is, I think, the thing that is most important, is once you undergo this, okay, so one of my teachings is when you go to an elder and you ask for counsel, you give them tobacco, you ask for counsel, they give you counsel, you have to internalize that. You don't just, like, if you don't like that advice, go off to another elder and give them tobacco and get a different advice. But lots of our colleagues do this. They run around asking for, counsel, and then not internalizing it. So if you invite us into your spaces and you say, we're going to do the work of making you welcome, and it's like, we've changed the DNA of your organization. You can't go backwards now. You cannot go back to like that, good, done the Indian thing. Let's move on to whatever the next one is, or let's go back to whatever we were doing before. It can't be that way. You have to actually internalize the teachings and the things you've learned and move forward with that, so that it's not just for your Indigenous colleagues or projects, it's for the organization and for everyone who interacts with your organization. It's a big ask, but if you're going to go down the road of decolonization or indigenization, I use this, I'm making air quotes a lot, then that's what the work is.
I don't mind going next, because I say that all the time, Yvette. I say that all the time, that this is about changing the DNA of the institution. This is about changing the DNA of the organization. And that is what this work is. And I think about a needs assessment, which is that internal work that you're talking about, and really understanding, what is your commitment? What is your commitment right now? What is your commitment coming in the next 6 months, year, 5 years, 10 years? Also, in relation to that commitment, name what you are not ready to do. Are you not ready to give the building? Are you not ready to give the land back? Like, why not name that and figure out how to get there? Because the kind of like unspoken, okay, we'll do this, but we're not going to touch this, that's not going to change the DNA of the organization, and that's not going to move us forward in the future. Like the Red Nation, which is this amazing organization down in Tewa Lands, they say decolonization or extinction. Yeah, this is about programming and art and institutions, but this is about climate change and how we relate to one another, the ongoing health of our communities and world. And to think that that's not connected to your everyday actions is quite false. And so yes, and all of that takes time, and then to do that work to do that preparatory work, and then to do the work in collaboration with communities, of course, takes time. But I also really want to stress that, like, if you're not in process of building or creating those relationships with local Indigenous folks, if you don't have Indigenous leadership at all levels of your organization right now, if you don't have like consistent Indigenous programming, if you don't have a process of land back, then you're like already really behind. So just like start to catch up. So give that little like prodding.
Yeah, I would add to that, be prepared to make mistakes, to own them, and to work together to find solutions that are meaningful, and to show us that you're on this journey and you're willing to do the dishes, to get your hands in the muck, to open yourself up. As artists, we are so used to making mistakes, but something that has been quite healthy about the discussions that have been going on during this pandemic are that we need to be able to share those mistakes in rehearsal and in process, because if we always have to be perfect, which I don't know where that begins exactly, But that idea that we all have to show up with our best selves and our best performance at every inch of a rehearsal even means that we don't have a chance to stumble upon new discoveries that can be so important in the process of creating art. And that starts with administration modeling that for us as well.
Yeah, I want to hop on exactly what Marion said. I think kind of zooming out to the art of musical theater, you know, we are given in regionals 3.5 weeks to put things together. There's not time to even talk about scene work sometimes. It's choreography, it's learning harmonies, it's getting it up on its feet, it's tech, it's happening. And for me, the art of musical theater has this double-edged sword of capitalism at its core. Of all the sit-down theater art forms, it's the most accessible. If you live in a small town, you can see a bootleg on YouTube, or you can download the album. You can have a full relationship with this art form without ever seeing it in a theater, which is amazing because it breeds some of the most exciting artists. You know, I have artists, some of the best musical theater performers in Canada don't read music or haven't taken a classical dance class before. And so in that sense, it's amazing because it can really get to anyone who has a calling to find it. But on the other edge of that sword means that it is something that is consumable and a deliverable at its core. So a lot of theaters, from Broadway to, you know, the small regionals, put on musicals to make money. They are the successful big productions. They cost a lot of money to put on, but they're counting on bums and seats to be able to pay for the, you know, the new commissions or the smaller works or things that are a little bit more of a risk. So for me, I don't know how we can ever move music theater towards decolonization if at the core of it is this fear of risk, or that it's always product driven. So at the core of this, at the core of funding and everything, like, it costs a lot to make a musical. It costs a lot to put it on. We know that. But for me, it's the art form that is the closest to decolonization because it's made on this continent. It is something that is born and bred on these lands, and it's something that is inherently community driven. There's 40 people on stage. It is a community-based story art form. And for me, I just would love to see the future of musical theater be able to find process and value in process and value in how these artists, like we're talking about, these relations with the institutions, with the art form itself, how those can grow over time, and not in a 3.5 week bubble where we better sell this out or else we're, you know, in trouble. I'd love to be able to see these risks be taken, again, risks, these risks be taken to further the art form, because for me it's a newer art form compared to theater, compared to opera, and I really think that we can flesh it out in a really mindful way, but we just don't have the resources right now if we're always wanting, like we're talking about, this perfect product that's going to pay for yada 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 yada.
Thank you for that, Julie. There's lots of amazing, the chat is really exploding here with, you know, cheers for that mic drop. Stephanie Funk says so. Fantastic. I'm wondering if I can pick up on something that Julie was mentioning. Julie, you're an emerging artist. And I'm wondering about mentorship and about the, you know, the training process or education process of young artists, and if that's an opportunity for, you know, for real change and, you know, a turning of the, you know, re-steering of the ship in a way. I heard Tara Sky talk at a Native Earth talkback session a few months ago about how their experience at the National Theatre School was that, you know, one was expected to come into the school as a blank slate, and that you then learn all the things you need to know to be that performer, and then you emerge having learned all of those things. And so it seems like, you know, even at a very basic level, there's you know, just a reconceptualizing maybe of how we nurture young artists and how we bring young artists into the process and into this world. And I don't even know where the question is there, but I wondered if any of you had any thoughts about how to nurture or mentor young artists.
I'll just speak as a young, I'm going to hang on to young for a few more years, artist, but my career, everything that I have is because of women. It is because mostly of women of color who have seen something in me, or, you know, they've seen something in me and have really upheld that in me and believed in me. And I think of my many mentors that I have that are weekly phone calls, that are people that I go to and I trust. And for me, it's a part of the basis of those communities, that's what we do. That's how we're taught. And I know that that's a gift that I've been given as a young artist, that because of that generosity and that love and those teachings from these women in my life, I now have a responsibility to continue that. Whether that be answering an email or hopping on a Zoom with someone who reaches out to me, you know, it's important for me, and especially working within these institutions as one of a couple from a specific community, that responsibility weighs heavy on me and my art. And it's not just about putting something on my resume or getting a part and having that would be a really empty career. And for me, that responsibility has been laid since my first voice teacher and everything that has been given to me. And I wouldn't be here without those women in my life. So I just think it's a part of our community. It's what we've been taught. It's what's instilled in us from birth, basically, is that if someone's going to help you, you have to continue that on.
I am disturbed to hear Tara Sky say that. I know Tara, and she was in Reasonable Doubt, actually. Because you would think we would be further along in training right now than that idea of, like, you know, tearing the, and this is part of when I was at Native Earth, part of the issue was we were always bringing artists into work with a very diverse sort of training, most of it outside of any sort of conservatory or school, because that was what the experience was. Like, Indigenous artists would go into these training programs where they would be told that they needed to be torn down or be torn down and then rebuilt. And it's like, we've been plenty torn down in the last 500 years, thanks. We've been working on rebuilding ourselves. So don't try that. But it meant that it was a really hard go for Indigenous artists to get formal training. And there's tools in there that are useful, but we don't need to be recreated in your image. That hasn't worked, obviously. So it's disturbing. And I know that this is true. I mean, Donna Michelle, the general manager at Native Earth when I was there, and I used to phone around every year at the beginning of the school year, all of the training centers, universities, colleges, conservatories, and say, any Indigenous students? No, okay, thanks, bye. Over and over again, to try and not only find out where the students were, but also to prompt the organizations to be like, why? So why don't you have any Indigenous students in there? But we're back to my same sort of theory about, like, the decolonization, the transformation has to be radical, which is to say at the root. It cannot be, you can't just brown up the joint by letting in some Indigenous artists. And I'm sorry, I make Emily laugh a lot, apparently. You can't. You have to actually make transformational change at the base, not just for Indigenous students, certainly for us first, because it's Indigenous land, but for everybody else. Nobody needs to be torn down to be made into the image of what? Like, who holds that power to say what we should be? So sorry, that's disturbing and disappointing to me in 2021.
Go, Emily.
Oh, just, actually you, Marion, started to talk about this in the previous question, and then I think it's being continued, which is this one of the, tenets of colonialism is this, like, individualism, and which is what we're talking about, that there's so part of what we are talking about is let's challenge that notion. Let's challenge that notion, yes, at its root, at its core. some of the youngest performers in Dr. Atomic, I think she was 4 years old, was the youngest performer, you know, and that makes me think of not only why are there no Indigenous students in all of these in all of these programs and universities and trainings, but like, where's the pathway for folks living on reserves and reservation and rurally to even know that this might be a path that they might be interested in? So we have to think about like how to generate those pathways, and how to create that how to create that access, right? That access isn't necessarily even there. So how do we do that?
I would add to this that my experience of going through university, every class was really siloed. I mean, you need a whole team of people to learn all the things that you need to know in order to do this job. But I was very aware of voice teachers not getting along with each other. They were really open about disliking each other, actually. And that was a terrible model to grow up watching. And it's so non-Indigenous to openly not get along with people for your entire career. You know, it's just a terrible way to start. And I think that actually working as a community, show us what that is, show us what resolving your conflicts is about, share students, let students take what they want from different teachers instead of saying, well, I'm with this teacher, and so I can only talk about what we learned together, and I can't listen to what these other friends of mine are learning from their teachers, or it might mess up my technique. That is garbage. And actually, like, taking away the age groups that we're supposed to be stuck in as well, like, open that up. I'm going to talk about Namwayut now, because when I was gathering that group of people together, which was an honor to do, to bring my friends and colleagues into a space, I mean, I would love to have invited everyone, but of course there are limits, and we had to figure out what we were doing to begin with. And maybe it will continue to grow into a gigantic thing with all of my friends. But to take away it needs to be, you know, somebody needs to look their age to play this part. Somebody needs to look the sex of the part. I mean, we were dealing with animals as well. So like, just opening that wide up, changing the range of age, acknowledging that it's important to bring in someone who's youthful because they bring so much wisdom that has been uncluttered by all of the stuff that I feel like I'm now carrying, that I didn't used to have. And to just open up that whole idea of who's leading, like give everybody a turn to say their piece, to share what comes to mind, and to acknowledge that all of that is valuable and will be needed at some point in the process.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for all of this. I want to just, you know, open this up and talk as least as I can at this point, because I know we've only got about 10 minutes left here. But I did wonder about, you know, audiences and about educating audiences through this work. And I was thinking about, Emily, your work with, you know, with Dr. Atomic, and about audience expectations, and the ways in which this work kind of, you know, went out into the community and tried to engage communities. And you said you spent some time, you know, really educating the company and also audiences. And I just wondered about that piece. Like, how did that unfold? Was there resistance, or where were the, you know, moments of joy in that?
I mean, I think generally, maybe I can get to specifics, but I think generally we have to think about what the invitation is, right, to the audience. And part of that, when I'm creating my works, some of that is about what I expect from an audience, and trying to be clear about that in the languaging, in the invitation. I expect an engaged audience that is also going to take on some of the labor of the work, and that in my dance works can come about in many ways. Sometimes that's about helping us carry things. Sometimes that's about helping cook dinner because there's dinner as part of a 15-hour performance. Sometimes that's about listening in a different way, you know. So I think sometimes it's, you know, sometimes we call that protocol, or sometimes we can call that agreements, community agreements, things like this. I think that's those kinds of things kind of rooted in the invitation can really help to bridge what can sometimes be those cultural gaps, and can also really set the place of, I like to change the power dynamic, right? Of like, I like to think of an audience not as this like thing sitting back watching, but actually like we're in this together. Like we're in an invited community for this bit of time. So we all have, you know, different roles in this bit of time that we're going to share. But in order for us to make this a good time, we have to do that together, you know. And so it like shifts the responsibility a little bit. And certainly in Indigenous led productions, performances, programs, that's like where our like we set, what is it? Maybe someone can help me here. It's like we have to shift that power dynamic. We do have to shift that power dynamic and be a little explicit in that. One thing, just one, I think, simple example with Dr. Atomic was that we realized on the first performance, you know, people come to the opera and you get your champagne and you're chatting and you're talking, and then you expect that there's going to be a very clear signal when you sit down, and then the show starts. But we had added this cultural dance happening on stage so extending the beginning time of the opera. And so we had to learn from that first experience with the audience to really language the invitation a little bit differently, so people understood when the actual start was, and to shift the kind of social scene at the very beginning. And it was just a matter of education, you know, and of that languaging, and really, like I said, really explaining to the audience in a letter. I think Charles McKay, the director, then wrote a really gorgeous letter that he sent to everyone, all ticket holders, explaining what was happening, explaining what they were going to come to, and that really helped. And so over the course of the many performances of the summer, you could see the shift in the audience, and that's what this is about. This is about shifting consciousness, shifting behavior, shifting understanding, and
Yeah, I think we have to get over the idea of marketing things and shift that to engagement, right? Because it's a dialogue. This thing that we do is in dialogue with the audience. For me, they're, you know, in French it's assister à un spectacle, like you're there, and that implies the participation of the audience. They're actually helping at the event. I think if we reframe it to be about community engagement, which it sounds like was all of the stuff that you were doing, Emily, before, like leading up to Dr. Atomic, right? So that you're in dialogue with your audience before they ever get to the theater, so that they're coming with a curiosity about the things that you've already been talking about, as opposed to someone in an office deciding what the look of the show is going to be and what the tagline is going to be and trying to sell it to get the bums in seats. And so sorry, sorry, Julie, but this is what's going to be tough for musical theater if we continue to try and make musical theater with like 100 million people on stage. That is, you know, like we have to reframe the way we're thinking about the thing that we're making, the art that we're making, and how we're inviting our communities into the discussion. But for me, it has to be a discussion, a dialogue between the people who come and the people who are on the stage.
I think also sharing ahead of time with the audience, and for before and after, how they can engage in connecting with community beforehand at whatever level they're at, which can include reading lists, podcast lists, listening lists, other theater companies in town, other works that are happening, other galleries where you can highlight other Indigenous work that is happening, so that they're already aware of more than what they're just going to witness there, or have the chance to go out and continue that. I think I've seen companies engage immediately following Missing where they were taking care of the audience's hearts and souls before they leave, giving them a chance to talk to a counselor or smudge or something that just helped them leave behind the very heavy feelings that that show brought up. But beyond that, there can be much more. There could have been prep before and after that would give people the power to continue their learning on their own.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the role of witnessing art is so integral, and there's no art without the witness. And to be able to have that, again, going back to that idea of a product driven art form, that is passive, that audience is being served something. So to be able to bring that into the the artistic journey as a performer, and to be able to think of that as not a passive experience, seems really integral to this process. As well as, I just think for me, musical theater is a ceremony. Involves dance and joy and laughter, and you leave with a tune in your head. And so to be able to, the expectations, like Emily was speaking about, the expectations of the audience, of working with them and helping bridge that cultural gap is important, because to expect them to be here when everything's been here before, that's going to alienate people and that's going to leave audience members behind. But I do think that being able to do that in a conscious way, working towards a more integrated experience from the moment you enter the theater, from the marketing, even of having artists part of those conversations and part of those decisions, and that outreach and that engagement, that community justice is at the soul of the audience experience, being not just passive drinking wine and having popcorn at the intermission.
Thank you so much for this. Amazing. I am left with many tunes in my head, as Julie just said, from this conversation. And I know that I can speak on behalf of everyone else when I thank you all so deeply for sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. This was a truly wonderful conversation and session to be a part of. So thank you all so much for this. We do need to end right at 12 o'clock because these artists have other places to be at 12 o'clock. So I do want to thank my colleagues behind the scenes at the Watershed Festival for all of this labor behind the scenes, helping make all of this happen. Thank you to all of you. Thank you all for coming, all of you in the Zoom room today. And I would invite you to come back at 1 o'clock for a conversation with Anne Midgett and Tim Nelson about the future of opera. So thank you again to all our esteemed panelists. Take care. Thank you.